chew bubblegum, recorded from a secret location in the city that moves mountains.
Greetings.
You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here.
Welcome to Here to Chew Bubblegum on the radio. I'm Goose, and that guy was Justin Perkins, filling in for Dirty Dan this week, who slipped and fell into a massive pit of barbecue sauce. And,
well, I hope he's okay.
Yeah, he's just really sticky. Let me ask you a question before we get started here. Somebody told me the other day, it was actually my daughter, that our intro is too long. Do you think it's too long? I said, it's right at a minute.
No, like my music's about 30 seconds, but I think yours is a really good setup.
Thank you.
I really think it's a good setup for the show. I don't think it's too long.
I don't either. Thank you very much. You are listening to Here to Chew Bubblegum. Again, I'm Goose, and we are lucky enough to have Justin Perkins of Talk Junkie on with us. How's your week been so far, Justin?
I felt pretty rough most of the week, but I did not have COVID.
Good.
I don't know if I've got some mystery illnesses out there other than the ear infection, but I'm doing great today. I get to be on here with you, and I've been, anytime I get to talk and be on one of these other shows, I get excited, so I'm in a good mood today.
Well, we love having you here, and we do have a special treat coming up in this episode. We will tell you about it in about 28 minutes or so. And I knew when I texted you the other night checking on you, so while I'm eating wings, I knew you didn't have COVID when you were eating the wings.
Well, I've tested to death, and, it kept coming up negative. I was like, man, why do I feel so bad? Because, I felt awful for days, but I don't know, I feel like $1,000,000 today.
Not
Ears
good.
bother me a little bit, but I feel great.
Well, good. I am very glad, and I guess we'll get started with some listener email, and Justin, I will let you go first.
Okay. Let's do this on the fly, so I'm not going to be as smooth in these transitions as you guys are.
Oh, yes, you are.
Okay, we got an email you guys got an email from Jessica. Hello, my name is Jessica, and I heard about your show from an interview with Seth's Daily Podcast. Great interview on his show. After discovering your show, I listened to almost every episode. My question is in regards to the Paintsville train UFO incident. Have you heard or uncovered anything else? Roswell.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica, for writing in. No, sadly, we have not heard anything else about that. I think Dirty Dan said that he had a guy that did work for the railroad that was checking into it, but that was a few weeks ago, and we've not heard anything. Fascinating story, the Paintsville train versus UFO. I've always said from the beginning, I actually think something happened because the report was written like an incident report that we've read on the show before. What's your thoughts on that, Justin?
I think in regards to covering something up, there wasn't a lot of publicity about it. It happened in a very small rural area. It happened, it wasn't a passenger train, and it wasn't, something that had a lot of public eyes on it when it did happen. Really, it's something that probably should have just faded away and not being as prevalent, story-wise as it is, other than it was such a weird instance for these people that worked for the train company that did speak apparently somewhat privately, but it's kind of got the word out, that really fortunate we know anything about it. So it's not going to be an easy egg to crack. I think it's going to be hard to get, but I think when you finally get that person that's finally ready to go, you know what, forget it, I'm going to talk. Then a lot's going to come out. And
I totally agree with what you're saying. One of the things, too, that, there was pictures of a train that the one supposedly, this was the first car that was supposedly it. The letters and all that stuff were darked out. But it had damage explained, that was explained in the incident report where the damage would be. And that makes me lean towards there's something to this.
Well, the thing that kind of puzzles me. Okay, there's damage to the train. The report states that, and it's fairly significant damage apparently because of the way they reacted, and they didn't put this thing straight back into service or get it back out. My understanding it wasn't ever seen again. Okay, what are your options there? It didn't hit an animal because I don't even know if they'd know that they hit an animal. It's the same way with the person. Trains hit people all the time, and if the conductor herself doesn't see it, they don't know. And it didn't hit a tree because, again, that's not. I don't think that's going to make enough of an impact, maybe for them to even have to immediately take any action. Same thing with a vehicle. You see vehicles get hit by trains, train wins every time. So it's had to hit something substantial for it to be damaged at that point. Obviously, it wasn't a rock slide or anything of that nature, or that would have been an easy ride up. You just ride it in there. Hey, there's rocks on the track, big rock slide. So it obviously hit something. What could it hit out in the middle of nowhere that was stout enough to do damage?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Our next email comes from Uncle. Hello, Goose and Dan. I wanted to suggest some investigation work on UFO stories from the 70s. It says but I think he means in the 70s. A lot of global things was going on, and from my recollection, there was quite a few stories and sightings. The most famous one from that time period was a Travis Walton abduction story. Anyway, sometimes you have to study or look into the past to move forward in the future. Just my opinion. Thank you very much, Uncle, for writing in. This is actually something me and you talked about on the phone just a few days ago. And he's right. There were a lot of global events going on worldwide. You had the gas shortage in the 70s. You had, there was several things. The Travis Walton abduction story. He mentions that specifically. What's your take on that?
Well, me as a generally skeptical person, his is one of two abduction stories that really interests me, and I really put some confidence into. Things he said later, and obviously he's made some money off of it, and that's always a red flag. But then I think about if what really happened to him did happen, the least he could do is profit off of it. But that always has put some red flags up for me. The only thing about his story, his initial story and the situation, that ever gave me any kind of uneasy feeling about believing it was the fact that he did see, I believe, a psychiatrist and went through hypnosis before he made his confession. And, you brought up a point the other night on the phone that, about the lie detector test. I know how many he had passed previously, but I thought about that after we talked about it, and obviously the newer lie detector test is going to be much more accurate than the older. But I never put a lot of credence in those to begin with, but I do see your point there. I just his story's been fairly consistent. He had a fair amount of witnesses, and it was an odd circumstance. I don't know at that time, because you look at what it was societally at that time, I don't know how much he could have benefited from faking it at that time. Whereas late 80s, 90s into now, there's definitely the possibility for financial gain for faking it. But back then, I don't know how much of that was, because they were offered money.
Yeah.
One of the gentlemen, the one that's never talked about it, has been offered money numerous times to talk about it. And he says he just don't want to relive it. And he wasn't even the one abducted. And there were a lot of them in the 70s that were made fun of. Oh, yeah.
And, I don't know. There's still a big question mark there with his abduction story for me personally. I would have to do a little more research, and I'm going to be honest. I've done pretty much like maybe 2% of research on Travis Walton, so I've not done a lot.
I found out about it when I was still really, really big into it, so it really overtook me there for a long time. And then went years. The Fire in the Sky movie I didn't enjoy as much because I had read his actual account, and he's come out many times and said, hey, that's not even close to what happened to me. So I was kind of turned off by the movie a little bit. But then I heard his interview on Rogan, and the story of the initial abduction I still was fairly interested in. It's some of the claims he's made since then that it almost feels like, okay, this happened and nobody believed me, and maybe I need to say more that maybe didn't really happen to get, or I need to make a little more, or I need to get a little more attention. It's some of the things he said after that that I've got a lot of question about.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You want to go ahead and take the next email there, Justin?
Yes. Let's see. This is from Reed. I just want to remind everyone to focus on the positive. No matter what life throws at you, be kind and help others when you can. Above all, focus on the positive. Well, Reed sounds like an extremely intelligent human being.
Yes, he does.
I would agree with that completely.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with it. He's wrote in before, but never anything positive. So I'm glad to see that he's reminding us as well as the listeners to stay positive, and I totally agree with that. Tina says, Goose and Dirty Dan, please do a segment on Dr. Travis Taylor. He is currently the host of Skinwalker Ranch, the TV show. He's also been in a lot of other shows. I think he knows what he's talking about, Roswell. The first season of Skinwalker Ranch, I watched every episode. The second season, I've DVR'd the second season. I think I've watched 3, maybe 4. For some reason, stretch for time is reason number 1. But he was like yourself. He did seem skeptical at first, and some things happened on the Skinwalker Ranch show. I don't think he really hosted. He's one of the researchers there. He definitely is an interesting guy. He was on one show, I can't think of the name of it, where they actually did an experiment of Nikola Tesla's. And it worked 100%. With the, I can't think of the name of what the Tesla coil. They had them so many feet apart, and they had this motorboat that was a remote control battery. They took it out and rigged it up where it would run off electricity from the Tesla coils. And it actually did once they harnessed and toned down the force, because when they first put it on the lake or pond where they were at, it actually caught on fire. It was too much power. But once they toned it down a little bit, and I think they did that just by moving the coils farther apart. But he definitely is an interesting man.
In regards to that show, I've seen a couple episodes of it. I see this big shift. Like, I was a Leonard Nimoy In Search of History type of guy when I was young. I loved that show.
Oh, and amazing show.
He went into so many weird little things, and a lot of people looked at that as being this corny, show. That, to me, that show was a lot more honest. And this guy may be, you may have some of the best researchers in the world on some of these shows, but I think the television companies want to treat this with a certain level of, tongue-in-cheek. It's here, but let's make it a little goofy and let's make it a little over-exaggerated. And I don't think they give the topics as much. Yeah, I don't think they give the viewers and the topics as much respect as they deserve. Like, even as a skeptic, I can look at something and go, okay, I don't believe this, but if you approach it scientifically and intelligently, then, let somebody make their own mind up about it. And that's the only issue I've ever seen shows like that. And the few shows I've seen from there, I've noticed that, like, I can tell that these people are trying to do a good investigation, do a good job, and then there's scenes that clearly they're overacting and they're doing these things. And talking to a couple people that's worked on some shows, specifically for the Learning Channel, a lot of times they push these people into having these reactions, and they've done it with ghost hunters. In my opinion, quote unquote, there's some people out there that have admitted they may have faked the whole chair thing, and that's about the time I quit watching it. But I think those people really wanted to make a good show, but I think there's a lot of pressure to not let it be too serious from these television companies.
Oh, I totally agree with you. You mentioned something there when we were talking about inventors and shows and stuff, and I got a and I hope you don't care me reading this. I got a text message today from friend of the show, Luke Fugit, who will be on the show in the next couple of weeks. And we've been texting back and forth trying to set up a date. So a little bit after 1 today, he sends me this text. I have the Jacob's Ladder experiment going again. Does the place you record your show at now have a separate 20 amp circuit that none of your equipment runs on? This thing maxes out at 20 amp breaker and could possibly cause a surge on that circuit. I haven't been able to replicate the results I had before, but we could try it sometime. So I told Luke, and he sent a fascinating video back in May. It was on YouTube, but I think he since took it down. And I told him I'm not sure. I could find out. He may want to do the experiment where he's at and record the footage, and then we could come in and play it over the interview and just talk about it and so forth. Now, the one he sent me back in May, it was fascinating. And I've said this before: if anybody could build a time machine, Luke Fugit, there's no doubt, can build a time machine.
Well, first off, here's the open invitation to Here to Chew Bubblegum. I have a garage. Let's build a set. Let's record it there. I've got homeowner's insurance. Secondly, I did not find Luke through anyone I knew. And I didn't realize, one, that I'd seen him numerous times, and two, that we lived in the same county. I found him on YouTube.
Yeah.
And first video I watched, I was like, this dude's, the first one was some of the tiny house stuff, because I was big into tiny house stuff. Yeah. And then I started seeing some of the stuff he's building. Then when I seen that whole lift up side panel on the rear of his truck, I told my dad, I was like, you gotta see what this guy's building. Dad's like, oh, you know that guy, he lives over in Knott County, you know. And I'm like,
yeah,
that guy is. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, I've known him my whole life. I was like, wow, he is a certified genius. He is a mad scientist, and I love watching anything he creates. And he seems like a super nice, humble guy. Like, he just seems like a great human.
Super nice guy. And I've known him. Me and him went to grade school together. I didn't even know he had a YouTube show. And I think last year when I started the podcast, I got on YouTube and searched Time in Kentucky. And there's a video of him standing in front of the big blue horse mailbox in Hyman.
And the dirtbag video.
Yeah.
Him, right? Yes.
So that's what got me started on him, and I was getting ready to start the show, and I thought, hey, because we talked about some of his military stuff before with space and all this and that, and because he was always fascinated by space and traveling in space when he was younger, and but I mean, there was many nights that he would ride around with me. And I don't know where this came at. And, we were going to, somebody may have had a patent on it, but we had come up with this thing like a mechanic's blanket. Like in the wintertime, if you've got a diesel mechanic or any mechanic that works outside in cold weather, they could put this on the ground and plug it into the cigarette lighter, and it would keep them warm. And it was basically, our prototype was a heated blanket, and we'd wrap leather around it. And he tried it out, and it worked. But I think the reason we couldn't patent it, and this was like 11 years ago, 2010, when Medium came up with this. I think somebody had already had a patent on that, but it's not on the market. But they did, in fact, have a patent on it.
That's a great idea. I'd like to have that many a days in the winter welding pipe.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to go ahead with the next email?
Let me see here. This is from Kathy. Hey, have you seen all those articles about an upcoming solar Armageddon that they expect will cause huge internet downtimes? I think it's pretty crazy. I wonder how much of it is just fluff. If it's actually a short-term thing that can happen, like in the next year. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think solar flares are real. I don't know how much is fluff. The last time that we had one that took out stuff was in the late 1890s, and it took out the telegraph machine in the western part of the United States. So what about you, Justin? What's your thoughts on that?
That's the scary part about things like that, is because we've not experienced them, I don't think people know how serious the threat is. And, take a solar flare, dependent on just good timing and proper alignment with us and where it pops out, that depends on if we get hit. And, we rotate around that sun a lot. So, the trajectory is constantly changing, but we will be hit. That statistically we know that. Then there's also the variable of how bad will it be. Bad enough to just be a really bad EMP, bad enough to be, civilization killing. Like it's one of those things that it's out of sight, out of mind. But there's a lot of worry and possibility there for that to be a serious situation. Anytime they warn us ahead of something like that, that worries me a little bit, because I wonder, we've spent all this time with no ability whatsoever to really predict if it's going to happen. Now all of a sudden you can predict that it's going to happen and its magnitude without it happening first, because my understanding on especially things like solar flares, and I know this isn't specifically in regards to that, but is you don't know what it's going to be until it happens, because they're erratic. There is no predicting a solar flare. So to what degree, I've not read these articles, to what it actually is and to how serious it is will be dependent upon, what type of event. But them being able to predict it, maybe they just don't want us on the internet for a while.
Well, definitely. The solar flares, if it's on a worldwide level where it takes out all of your power sources, that affects your ATMs, your debit card would be useless, all the stuff in the store would be useless, you wouldn't have gas, you wouldn't have, it would knock out your communications. That would be a very, very bad situation.
Oh, that would be almost unrecoverable. I don't think a lot of people understand how money works, and I didn't. That's not me trying to be uppity. I really didn't until looking into it more recently. But I think, and this is probably wrong, but it is over 26%. It may have been 36% of all the money printed by the United States has been printed in the last year or so. And a lot of that money, especially like the COVID relief money, it was never physically printed. It's digitally represented. That's why you had digital basically a download into your bank of these funds. Those funds exist digitally, but in physical form, I don't know that they've even been printed yet, or that they have to be. First of all, if anybody ever realized how ludicrous the ideal of money and how money works, it started a system of something like a promissory note of, I owe you this amount, and whether I pay it with collateral or whatever the case may be, this amount of monetary value I will repay you. That's why you look on the dollar bill. It's a note. We don't go that way any longer. We're not on the gold standard. Our money really doesn't have any value, and I don't want the system to fail. I hope it works forever, but it's a scary system to begin with. But that was the whole point in 9/11.
Right.
They thought that would cripple these credit card companies and that would cripple our economy, and it's not that wasn't possible. I don't think they had a good grasp, on. They may have learned to fly planes, but they didn't have really any intelligence when it came to how systems were backed up and how worldwide that network was, and that's the only thing that really saved us. So if you take out that network, we're definitely in a bad spot.
Definitely. Well, the last email this week is when I transferred it over, I forgot to put their name in. I'm sorry.
I may have it.
So, no, I don't think you have it either. And I want to apologize to this listener, because normally what I do when I send these out, I just group them all together and I email them out. So I apologize that I don't have your name on this. But the email says, "Hello, Goose and Dirty Dan. First, let me say I'm loving the show, so you guys are on fire. Second, if you or any of your listeners are into future predictions, research 2x2 Chinese future prophecies." And that's spelled TUIBEITU, Chinese future prophecies. Mind-blowing stuff, Roswell. Again, sorry that I forgot to include your name in that one. Is that a real Chinese prophecy, or is somebody playing a?
Yes.
Okay.
There's one system, and I don't know that wording is correct. I used to know it by heart. There's one system they can do it with a certain number of beans or a certain number of dice, and they throw them down and they get random. And the Native Americans have a version of something similar to that. All hate mail can go to talkjunkie@gmail.com. I am very flexible, even on my skeptical side, but when it comes to mediums and fortune telling and future predictions, I'm at a 0%.
Okay, all right.
To date.
What about Nostradamus?
I never understood how even when I was a really big believer, I never understood, because you can get, if you'll get, and that's a lot of it, is presentation and context are everything. I would definitely recommend, if you've ever considered going to a medium or a psychic, first thing to do, read Houdini's books, and definitely check out a documentary called An Honest Liar. They both men are magicians. Both men show you exactly how they do it. But in regards to Nostradamus, really everything he wrote, if you study the history of his time period, and he was a troublemaker, or it's really relevant to his time. A lot of people say the same thing about Revelations. It's really relevant to the time, and if you read it with that knowledge only, then it becomes so. When you read Nostradamus' quatrains, and to me it's very far-fetched to connect them the way they do connect them to modern things, but when they do connect them to modern things, it's always after something happened. The human brain is made, it is 100% wired to look for things that sync up, to look for combinations. It's a pattern gathering machine, and it takes knowledge that it has and processes it against input, and it looks for patterns and collects them. If you read them in their entirety without segments being taken out, they're gibberish, because we weren't in the time that he wrote them. And actually the story of what he was doing with his quatrains more than likely is really a lot more interesting than the story of what they've kind of become as this future predicting thing. He used them to make money, for one, but also he hid a lot of things in them, and it was interesting in what his future, or what his future was actually predicting. It was more turned towards kind of communicating with certain people. It wasn't until he predicted the death of a king.
Before we move along with the show, I want to tell everyone that you can meet the innovators of Horror Talk Radio. I'm talking about CK and Uncle Bill from deadpit.com. They will be appearing at this year's Fright Night Film Festival in Louisville, Kentucky, October 1st through the 3rd at the Ramada Plaza Hotel Complex. That is a mouthful. Ramada Plaza Hotel Complex. For more information, visit FrightNightFilmFest.com. Be sure to stop by and say hello to CK and Uncle Bill from DeadPit.com. They have had a show since 2005. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Yeah.
That I think that predates Rogan.
Oh yeah, I mean,
they're Adam Carolla level, right?
And they're from Eastern Kentucky. I'm not going to say where they're from, but they're from Eastern Kentucky. You can always call, text, or leave a voicemail by calling 606-373-3396. That's 606-373-3396. You can email me, Goose, at heretochewbubblegum.com, Dirty Dan at heretochewbubblegum.com, Rebecca at heretochewbubblegum.com, or Ned or Elliot at heretochewbubblegum@yahoo.com. We're going to move on, and we're going to talk briefly about a subject here really quick. Let me flip through my notes. I found it, and then we're going to take a break. But before we take a break, Elon Musk, I'm assuming you know who he is, correct, Justin?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Okay. Elon Musk, in a recent tweet, said that UFOs are 100% real. And this is from UFO Sighting News. Elon Musk, creator and CEO of SpaceX, has boldly announced on Twitter this week that, and quote, I'm not saying there are UFOs, but there are UFOs. Elon Musk is America's golden child who is given free ride informations, data designs, and schematics of most of the top secret alien tech that DARPA has to offer and leaks it slowly into the public domain. This time, he leaked something different, something the U.S. government doesn't want to admit or make a big deal about, that UFOs do exist. Elon Musk has the highest tech cameras attached to every satellite orbiter and rocket he sends into space. Not to mention, he sent a Tesla Roadster into orbit it orbited around our sun with half a dozen live feed cameras on it. This means Elon has seen and recorded dozens of close-ups and has raw footage of UFOs from over the years. Raw footage that he has not yet admitted to owning and has not yet released, but hits 100% in his possession. Musk, being the rebel he is, we may see the day when he says enough is enough and it's time to release some of the raw footage for the world to see. That's how the world changes from rebels who do things differently from all the rest. Again, his tweet earlier this week, was, I'm not saying there are UFOs, but there are UFOs. And that was from Elon Musk. What's your thoughts on that? Him stating there's UFOs.
He's one of them cryptic guys, and what worries me about the statement is he's liable to come out with some weird twist on it later to be like, I'm not saying there's aliens, I'm saying that I have a UFO or Tesla has a UFO. So I've always been a huge fan of Elon Musk, and I've always been into everything he's doing. And there's one thing we really shared a really strong agreement on at one point in time. Not that he discussed it with me, we're not that close. But was his distrust and dislike of AI. And now he is pushing and furthering AI more than anybody else on the planet. So Elon, and I had never thought about the idea that he could possibly he probably has more raw footage than any other civilian in the world. If you've got it, release it. That's awesome. Stop building the AI. I mean, come on.
Oh, I totally agree with you. We're going to take a break, and we're going to have an all-new Ned Said. And when we come back, you're in for a treat because the brilliant Justin Perkins came to me a few weeks ago and came up with an idea to do a segment during the Here to Chew Bubblegum podcast. And sometimes we'll drop a soundbite or something in the radio show called Believe It or Not, spelled Knott. When we come back from the break, you will be getting a special treat because the second half of the show will be Believe It or Not, Knott, with Justin Perkins and myself. You're listening to Here to Chew Bubblegum, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Hello everyone, this is Gary Sloan. The City of Coal Run Village Mayor Andrew Scott and City Commissioners Big Joe Atkins, Trey Deskins, Beverly Joe Osborne, and Mike Steele encourage you to shop local. With over 200 businesses in the City of Coal Run Village, they offer games, restaurants, gas, auto parts, cars, and much more. You'll find this and so much more waiting for you in the City of Coal Run Village. Shop local and shop often.
Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Elliot from the Spooky Family Podcast, and I want to remind you that our buddy, the Paranormal Trucker, has a brand new podcast out. Yes, you can catch the Paranormal Trucker and his crew, Snowman and Large Marge, anytime on YouTube.
They're going to bring you spooky tales from the road, ghost stories, updates on new tech, conspiracy theories, and everyone's open road favorite, unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Be sure and tell them Large Marge sent ya.
It's now time for Ned Said on Here to Chew Bubblegum.
Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins.
Take a lighter look into the darker side of the world. Join Elliot, Gertie, and Beagle as they jump into the dark abyss of hauntings, serial killers, conspiracy plots, and beyond. The Spooky Family Podcast premieres July 1st, wherever you find and listen to quality podcasts.
When you want fresh, authentic Mexican food, you want El Picante in Coal Run. Dine on sizzling hot fajitas, the freshest pico de gallo, or if you're craving their secret ingredient jalapeno dip, the only place you'll find it is El Picante. Look, there are Mexican restaurants on every corner. The difference is in the mouth-watering food and the great service you'll get at El Picante in Coal Run. Visit El Picante for lunch today.
From the heart of Appalachia, located under a shopping mall near the city that moves mountains, you're listening to Here to Chew Bubblegum with Goose and Dirty Dan.
Day after day, fighting to live, just to live. Hearts filled with pain, how much can one give and give? Always feels like no one's on your side. Everybody needs a hand sometimes. Have a little faith when the road is dark and hope is gone. Keep it in its place. You'll carry on. I know now. We're all trying to make it through today. If we try and have a little faith.
It's now time for Believe It or Not with Justin and Goose.
Hello, I'm Justin Perkins, and some of the best things in life are not quite believable.
Jot 'em down, store. Love from Abner. My name's Goose, and welcome to the first ever episode of Believe It or Not, spelled K-N-O-T-T. Justin, why did we call it Believe It or Not, spelled that particular way?
Because both of us are atrocious at spelling. No, because we're both from a small little county in eastern Kentucky called Knott County, Kentucky. A fact I know me and you both are very proud of. And it's a wonderful and different place.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we're going to be doing this from time to time. We're going to be talking about everything. We're going to be talking urban legends, true stories that you may have never heard of, and mostly, hopefully, most of our content will be Kentucky related.
Well, Eastern Kentucky has history its own, a dialect its own, and a way of life its own, and I think it'd be good to get a lot of that out. I don't know how many counties in our area has a Booger Branch, a Booger Holler, a Booger Road, and that may sound like an odd name to people from away from here, but that's in reference to the boogeyman. Those are places that told children to stay away from. And we have haints and haunts, which are very similar things that a lot of other places don't have. So it's an interesting history, and it's a culture that is very quick to believe someone if they give you a good, honest story, and it's a culture that is quick to question something if it sounds a little bit too good to be true. So, you'll hear these things, and it's up to you to determine if you believe it or not.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about a story, and then after we get done, we're going to say if we believe it or if not, and why not. Before we get started, Justin, have you ever heard of the Sack Man? Have you ever heard that urban legend?
No, I have not.
Okay, he was a supposedly, and my grandfather told me that he heard a story when he was little. The Sack Man was a man that would come out from gardens, people's gardens, and he had a sack over his shoulder, and he put bad children in his sack, and he would always take them off, and they would never see him again. It was called the Sack Man.
That is an interesting story. I've not heard that.
Yes. Today, we're going to talk about the Pike County UFO sighting from 2012. For those of you that may not be familiar with this, on October 16th, 2012, residents of Pike County looked high in the sky to find a strange sight. Amateur astronomer Alan Epling described it to a local reporter as looking like two fluorescent bulbs, side by side, parallel, shining very brightly. It would get so bright that they would seem to emerge, and it could be seen clearly with the naked eye, Epling said. Then it would dim almost invisible. It wasn't anything I recognized, definitely not an airplane, and I've never seen a helicopter that looked that way. Epling wasn't the only one who noticed this. Police in Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee also got phone calls from concerned citizens. Calls were made to nearby airports, but government officials could shed no light on the unidentified flying object that was said to have reached an altitude of 60,000 feet. This remained more or less stationary for a few hours, suggesting that it was tethered to the ground somehow or hovering under its own power. Justin, before we continue, and this also made national news, did you see this for yourself when this happened?
No, I didn't see it firsthand. I seen some of the news reports, and I actually had to refresh my memory on the video because the video was a little different than I had remembered it. But I do remember it happening and hearing about it the day it happened, but I did not see it.
Okay. Well, about a year after, Rich Duvall knows what the object was. Sitting in a conference room in Mountain View, California, he beams proudly as he runs a YouTube clip of the whole incident that was featured on newscast. The mysterious craft was, quote, his doing, or at least the work of his Google team. The people in Pike County were witnessing a test of Project Loon, a breathtaking, ambiguous plan to bring internet to a huge, as yet unconnected humanity via thousands of solar-powered, high-pressure balloons floating some 60,000 feet above Earth. Project Loon balloons would circle the globe in rings, connecting wirelessly to the internet with a handful of ground stations and pass signal to one another in kind of a daisy chain. Each would act as a wireless station for an area about 25 miles in diameter below, using a variant of Wi-Fi to provide broadband to anyone with a Google-issued antenna. This was meant to be low-cost internet to those who otherwise wouldn't have it, and it would help smartphones connect to make it them more quickly become cheap. That was the whole explanation. Over a year later, that it was a Google internet balloon and part of Project Loon. I've not done much research on Project Loon, but for me personally, that throws up a big red flag. I do not think it was Google.
I don't know that it was. That's a very impractical way to do internet. I think Elon has the right idea with his satellites. It's a very good way to make your internet service proprietary by requiring them to have the Google antenna, but it doesn't seem logical that you're going to float that many balloons for that long. I did look at a couple balloons that are similar to that, and I saw some interesting stuff.
Well, those did exist in 2012 because I've talked to people in tech before, and they said that those did exist. They didn't really start becoming popular until 5 to 6 years later, and that they would be used in areas similar to ours, but they would also be used in cities like Kansas City, Missouri, Austin, Texas, Provo, Utah. they would use them in those places to provide low-cost internet service. The reason that I don't think that's what it was is, number one was you had the police get calls. If you're going to have something that high of an altitude, you would have to get a permit from the FFA. Okay? Now, you would also inform your local airport, your local police department, hey, we've got this FFA permit, we're going to be doing this because it's tied to the ground. From what I have researched this, the police, state, local, counties, they knew nothing. They had no idea. No airports knew anything about this. I just find that odd.
That could be the reason why it took them a year to confess, if it indeed was them. We live in a very, very litigious society, and the opportunity to sue is always prevalent. And maybe they had some lawyers dotting some I's and crossing some T's to make sure that, they're not in any violation, because sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission, but in that case they probably did. That is a problem with our reporting from the government, is if it was something like a UFO, well, they would just sit on it and never report it. If it is something easily explainable, a lot of times they'll just go, oh, well, that's what that was, and never take the time to tell anybody. But I would think that them taking that long to come out, some more of them taking the time to make sure legally we didn't cross any lines, or if we did, we can minimize the bleeding and keep the repercussions as low as possible.
And this was 2012, and Eric C. Kahn was still in business at the time. So you're exactly right.
It could have been tied to the Eric C. Kahn statue. That could be where they had it tethered from.
Well, was there an Eric C. Kahn statue?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. Actually, it was Lincoln.
Yeah.
It's made just like the Lincoln Monument.
Yeah.
I always assumed it was him, but I never looked close enough.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Lincoln.
But he did have himself as a mannequin sitting on billboards. Like
yeah, he's not vain at all.
I would say there's a lot of people that like to tie him to a balloon and let him float away. But not to get off track, getting back to her story. Like I said, it was over a year later. And people that do... and Mr. Epling that noticed this, he's an amateur astronomer. I'm sure he knows the difference between a balloon, airplanes, helicopters, planets, stuff that he may see, through his telescopes and stuff. But he said he never saw anything like this. How would a balloon dim down and almost get invisible and then come back bright and do the same thing over and over?
That part's not as hard. That part is due to the material. The material may look, on a lot of these balloons, translucent from the back, but you notice they said it was solar powered.
Right.
And a lot of time with this translucent material, it's not a solar panel like we think of the black solar panel. The surface area is the more important part, and the light reflection, it will play a part in that, but my guess would be that as the balloon flickered to the dim side, you were seeing more of the translucent side on the back, the dull side, and as it got brighter, it was a shift in the brighter side of the balloon coming out to the front.
Okay, now Alan Epling, the guy that spotted these, said they look like two fluorescent bulbs. Side by side. Now, you have UFOs. You have the classic saucer shape. You have the triangle, and the bulb ones. Those are. Let's say I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry there. But the bulb
like
ones,
the cigar shape.
Yes, they're tubes. Tube UFOs. It's what they call those.
Kind of like the Tic Tac deal.
Yes, definitely. Those are spotted all over the world. Typically, you find more reports of those over military bases or bodies of water. Why? I don't know. You don't typically find that description over a power plant like you normally would. Normally bodies of water or military bases. And just the fact that the law enforcement or local government knew nothing about this. And like you said, sometimes it is better to ask for forgiveness versus permission. But if you're going to do something like this, I mean, if you're really going to test this out, and if this first was the real deal and it worked, why aren't we using this technology today, 9 years later?
I think it's impractical. I don't think it was a very good idea. And I think Musk beat him to the punch with the satellite deal. It's a lot more stable platform. It's a lot more reliable platform, and it just seems to be. Look, the balloon thing, it just doesn't work, and it's ironic. The Roswell crash was always considered a balloon incident by the government, or stated to be a balloon incident by the government. But in this situation, to be completely honest, when I first seen the video, I viewed it with less kind of intent to investigate than I did this last time. And there's things about it in certain frames that make me think this is most definitely a solid craft. But there's things about it, especially the way it seems to wave. I can see the balloon argument for the first time in one of these. And it's ironic because it's the excuse for unidentified flying objects that I've never put any stock in. And this is the one time that I look at it and I go, maybe.
Well, okay, let me throw something at you. Let's say, for the sake of this story, that Rich Duvall did put an internet balloon up. Okay, let's say that balloon attracted a UFO. So in some pictures or video, you could possibly have a UFO versus the balloon, which could describe two side by side that were, tube UFOs versus a Project Loon balloon.
Well, like I said, there are images I've seen that it has a different characteristic, and it seems more solid than it does in others. So that's possible, and it's new technology. If they're looking at us as a civilization, one of the most interesting things to them are going to be new technologies that we have. So that would be logical. I could see that. But with the Epling guy that's seen it, he kind of never really committed to one thing or the other. The most conclusive thing he said is it's definitely a UFO because it can't be identified. But he did say on WYMT, I think it was WYMT, that he felt it was of this earth. He did feel it was ours. He just didn't know what it was. And, I didn't hear that until after I'd seen it. So that didn't really taint me looking at it. But I do see similarities in some of the other balloons I've seen and this object and the way it moved and its mannerisms.
That makes sense. And in the story, he says it's definitely not an airplane, and I've never seen a helicopter that looked like this. So he didn't rule out that it wasn't a helicopter, just one that he possibly could have never seen. So for argument's sake, I'm 50-50 on this. I could go either way on this. The reason why I could say it's totally false and it was something is because they use the old "it's a balloon" thing, and you've already touched on that a little bit. The reason that I could believe it is, they look like two fluorescent bulbs, which are two UFOs. So I'm split on this.
To me, when I heard they're now saying it's a balloon, I honestly automatically went into it thinking, well, I'm going to look this harder because I don't like my cue. I don't like that excuse ever. That's not a good option to me because most of the time, just based on the shape and behavior of the balloon, you don't get that. This thing really doesn't behave as much like a balloon in its shape because you don't see something that looks largely inflated until it looks to me like you have the fluorescent shaped things that look like two large cylinders, almost like buoys on a pontoon, and then between it you have stretched this fabric that is actually probably intended, I assume, to catch the sunlight. So in regards to it being a balloon, probably 6 out of 10 on the possibilities of it being an actual alien craft. Or even an American, like Project Craft, I'm probably a 3 out of 10. And I honestly started out, just based on my memory, kind of in the opposite direction on both of those.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first Believe It or Not, spelled Knott, with Justin Perkins and me, Goose. If you liked what you heard, we will be doing this on every Here to Chew Bubblegum podcast show. We'll be playing clips, if not a whole segment on the radio show. You can always email Justin and myself at believeItorNot at heretochewbubblegum.com. Again, Believe It or Not, spelled Knott, at heretochewbubblegum.com. Next week, we're going to be talking about a story that's not Kentucky related, but it is fascinating. And we're going to be talking about IBM and their involvement with the Nazis. Had you heard of this before I emailed you this talking point?
Like, remotely. I'd heard the reference, and I want to say I saw something on the History Channel years ago about it, and I know through a separate thing I researched that there was some connections, not only with them, but some other companies, but I'm not as well versed on it as I'd like to be, so I'm kind of interested in looking into that, because that kind of stuff always kind of piques my interest. And
I don't know if I've shared all these with you. I may have. If not, I am sorry. Some of the things coming up within the next month or so, Justin and I, segments we'll be talking about will be, we'll have a ghost story from Kentucky. Of course, Halloween coming up in October, so we'll have a ghost story. We'll be talking about the White House UFO incident of 1952, the Blue People of Troublesome Creek, the ferry doors of Hazard, Kentucky, Russians from Mars. I know I've not told you about that one, Russians from Mars, and a Hazard, Kentucky incident that happened, I think, in 2014. It was either a mine explosion, as some people claim, or it could have been a UFO. I know you're familiar with that one. I think you are. Anyway, so I guess we're going to wrap it up this week. Don't forget that DebPit.com will be at Friday Night Film Fest October 1st through the 3rd. For more information, check out FridayNightFilmFest.com. I want to say special thanks to Carlin for all the voiceover work. And don't forget about the new Midlife Crisis album available now. Be sure to check out CK Uncle Bill and the rest of the gang over at DebPit.com. Justin Perkins of Talk Junkie has been our guest on the show. Thank you again very much, Justin, for coming in and sitting in for Dirty Dan. He should be back next week. I want to remind everyone to check out Down on the Holler with Jordan and Brad. Don't forget about Seth's Daily Podcast. And if you're into spooky and paranormal, be sure to check out the spookyfamilypodcast.com. Justin, without giving much away, how fun was it to pick the bracket with Elliot and Beagle and
it was extremely fun. I got cheated out of Gertie, and she's the only one that thinks logically like I do, especially when it comes to it. But it was extremely fun, and actually the opening of the show, it was dedicated to Elliot and the Spooky Family. They did what is possibly the greatest opening of a show ever when they guest hosted your show when it was still you and Conrad when you had to be out. And so that was an homage to them. And I think Elliot will get it as soon as he hears it.
Again, Justin, thank you very much for stopping by this week. And I'm very excited about working some more with you on Believe It or Not. Most of the Believe It or Not will be filmed in studio, so you'll be right here in the new studio with me. And looking forward to that. Also, don't forget about Rebecca Short on TikTok and Honest Rebecca Thoughts on Twitch. That'll do it for this week. We'll see you next week, and until then, so long for now.
Thanks for listening to Here to Chew Bubblegum. Tune in next time as we dive deeper into things the government doesn't want us to know.